Hey everyone, Dan here, and I've been teasing this video for a while on the channel now, and it's finally here, my Wes Anderson ranking. So as I say, I've been teasing this video for a while now, and it's finally here, and I wanted to, as I say, as we go into 2024, do more specific film videos and not just the general monthly rankings. This will be sort of in a similar vein as those. But for a while I've always wanted to cover director filmographies. I mean, even my parents have said, oh, why don't you do a Tarantino ranking or a Nolan ranking? And I was like, yeah, well, you know, once I've completed their filmographies, I'll absolutely do that. But I didn't expect to do Wes Anderson, to be perfectly honest. You see, my journey with Old Wesley begins back in early 2022 when I watched The French Dispatch, which had just only recently come out at that time, and Fantastic Mr. Fox, which I didn't fully gel with, if I'm being honest. French Dispatch especially, they weren't really my thing. I didn't really get his style off the bat, unlike, say, Tarantino or Nolan, where, you know, immediately I really got into their style of filmmaking. But then sort of towards the end of 2023, I just, on a whim, decided to check out more of his films. Maybe because the majority of them were on Disney+, so they were all sort of together. But, you know, I checked out Rushmore, I really enjoyed that. Then I watched Darjeeling Limited, and then from there, you know, I just kind of watched through all his entire filmography, which, you know, led me to making this video now. Now, I think everybody has that one popular filmmaker who their style isn't really their cup of tea, even if they appreciate them. You know, some people will say that like Hitchcock, Nolan. Wes Anderson is that for me. You know, I can find him a bit style over substance. I don't really find myself getting particularly emotionally invested in a lot of his films. And I think the worst ones for me, like kind of the style over substance, can rub me the wrong way a bit. But I am still glad that I checked out his entire filmography, because there are absolutely some films that are really engaging, emotional, quite funny, and just overall a great time that can really engage you. So I'll be covering the 11 feature films that he's done, from Bottle Rocket to Asteroid City. So we're not going to include any of the short films like the Roald Dahl collection that dropped on Netflix recently, although I have seen those four. Very good mostly. Henry Sugar's the best one. Glad it's got an Oscar nom. That's awesome. Now, of course, as well, this is just my opinion, and I've just probably annoyed a lot of you by saying he's not really my cup of tea, Wes Anderson. So I'll probably have quite a few hot takes on this list, so be prepared. And finally, before we get started, I won't go too in-depth on a fair few of the films, because obviously I watched a lot of them throughout the end of 2023, and you can see my segments of those in the monthly rankings, specifically the September, November and December ones. So for any of the films I watched in 2023, the Wes Anderson films, I won't be too in-depth on them. But the ones I will go in depth on are Moonrise Kingdom and Asteroid City, which I haven't ever talked about on the channel. And I'll also go in depth on The French Dispatch and Fantastic Mr. Fox, because I did rewatch them in prep for this video, just to see, you know, obviously now that I've explored all of his filmography, just to see how my opinions on those would sort of change, and I could be more refined and, yeah, on those opinions. So without further ado, that's enough preamble, let's get to the ranking. Now the bottom three, to be honest, are of equal quality, so I was kind of umming and ahhing of, you know, which one should be the bottom. The bottom three, honestly, are quite interchangeable, but right now, I'm going to say my least favourite is The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which I think it generally has a bit of a negative reputation, and it's just really, really not my thing. I really didn't care for this one at all, and I just didn't enjoy it. I think what I was saying earlier with the style over substance not really being for me is especially the case with this one. You know, the stylized sets, the funky costumes, the deadpan delivery and whatnot. It just, I feel so disconnected from this film. And it does kind of rub me the wrong way, the kind of quirkiness of it all. It's sort of there for the sake of it and not really there for much of a reason. Whereas some of the other stylized Wes Anderson films feel like they have a point to why they're stylized in the way that they are. This one, I don't get the point. I also really don't care for the characters. I think Bill Murray as Steve Zissou is probably my least favourite Wes Anderson protagonist. I find the performance quite almost too deadpan. Like, I just don't get at all emotionally invested in him. Owen Wilson's character, Ned, I think he's alright, but his accent keeps changing, that's kind of annoying. And when those two are meant to be the emotional core of the film, and there's some pretty hard-hitting stuff conceptually that happens towards the end with those two, I don't feel a thing. And I think the real kick in the knackers for this film is the length. It's 2 hours, it's Wes's longest film, and it doesn't have drag. And something I do quite like about his films is that they are quite short and snappy, they are quite to the point and direct. This one just goes on and goes on. It doesn't need to be 2 hours. It could have been 90 minutes and you would have probably got a better film. It just drags. There are like little parts of the film I do like. I like Willem Dafoe's character and his charming German accent. I like the Portuguese David Bowie covers. And there's a couple of good scenes here and there, like the pirate attacks or the ending with the shark. But these are really just little bits and bobs about the film that they don't add up to a good whole, in my opinion. I just don't enjoy it. At number 10, I've got Bottle Rocket, his first feature film. And yeah, you can tell it's his first. It's absolutely, there's no style to this film. It's just a normal looking film. And you'd think, oh, okay, Dan will like that because he's not a fan of the over stylized Wes Anderson. And yeah, it's not really got any style, but it barely has any substance either. Yeah, I watched this one in November and I thought it was fine, but reflecting on it, it's left practically no impression on me. I just barely remember anything that happened in it. A bit like Aquatic, there's the odd good bit here and there. There's some cool shots like the training montage with the guns, that was pretty cool. The fireworks seems pretty cool. The heists at the beginning and end are decent, I suppose, but again, they're just the beginning and end. It's sort of few and far between in a way. I will say I do like the lead two characters, Owen and Luke Wilson's performances. I quite like them. And I guess if I was kind of clutching at straws trying to find some sort of meaning in the film, I guess the whole thing of Anthony, Luke Wilson's character, trying to sort of like his sort of self-discovery, I guess that's maybe a theme, but again, I'm kind of stretching because it does feel a bit surface level. Yeah, it just left very little impression on me, and this is why I was kind of umming and ahhing whether to put this at the bottom, because Life Aquatic I find it rubs me the wrong way, kind of pretentious way. Bottle Rocket, I didn't feel anything towards, so it's like, would you rather be bored or annoyed? It's that kind of thing, but I've put Bottle Rocket up here because it's his first film, he hadn't figured himself out yet, so you can kind of give it a bit of leeway, but they are quite equal quality. And completing the trilogy of the Wes Anderson films I don't like, The French Dispatch, which somehow got worse on a rewatch for me. You see, when I first watched this film back in 2022, I just thought that, Wes Anderson films weren't really my thing. I didn't really get the point. His films aren't necessarily going to tug on your heartstrings all the time, but they can still engage you, and there's a sense of heart with the best Wes Anderson films. I barely felt any sense of heart and soul in this film. It's just pretty visuals. I really don't connect with the characters or the stories, and yes, I say stories because it's an anthology film. It's mainly comprised of 3 sort of short stories, and for the most part, I don't care for them. And I know you could say the argument of it's been an anthology film. Of course, you're not going to have as much time to care about it or feel the heart and whatnot, but not all anthology films are like that. For example, I recently watched Wild Tales. It's an Argentinian anthology film. It's sort of 6 darkly comedic short stories. If you're a fan of Inside Number 9, definitely check this film out. But I adored this film because, yeah, this film had heart, had soul, had a kind of connective tissue. It felt complete. French Dispatch just didn't. I think the stuff outside of the short stories, like the Bill Murray publishing stuff and the Owen Wilson travelogue stuff, was pointless and just ate away time that maybe could have been used to develop the stories further. But I just don't care for this kind of stuff. And then you got the stories themselves. So you have the first one, the Concrete Masterpiece, which is the one with Benicio del Toro as the tortoise artist and Adrian Brody trying to buy his painting. A decent idea. And I think at the end, with the kind of, the ending is kind of comical and the wheelchair chase, I think that was kind of cool. But honestly, I found it quite meandering, to be honest. I just thought it was drawn out and nothing seemed to really get going, or nothing seemed to really happen. Then there was the second one, Revisions for a Manifesto, the one with Timothy Chalamet and the protesting students, which is probably my least favourite Wes Anderson thing. I was bored stiff watching this one, and I felt absolutely nothing. Didn't care about the romance that he was involved in, didn't care about the political protests. I didn't care about a thing that happened in it. Then there was the last one, the police commissioner, the third one with Jeffrey Wright. This one I actually liked. I thought it was kind of cool, a kind of cool sort of thriller story, like a hostage situation. Had some good tension and action, and I like the animated car chase. That was pretty cool. And this is the only part of the film where I feel like I had some heart. Like Jeffrey Wright's character connected with the chef because they're both non-white. This experience sort of resonated with Jeffrey Wright's character, and I think that there was some heart there, and I think that kind of brings in the idea of sort of the power of storytelling and wanting to tell just a fun story or finding meaning. I think that could have been explored a bit further, but it was just there in that final shot, and it could have been a lot better. Speaking of style over substance, I've mentioned that, with the style of this film, it's it feels like a Wes Anderson parody, specifically of the Grand Budapest Hotel, with the kind of the aspect ratios changing, the style and the colours and all that. It's just, it feels kind of obnoxious and it rubs me the wrong way. Now, if you had the changing style to differentiate the stories, that could have been cool. You know, have one in black and white, have one in colour, one in 4:3. But no, even within the stories, the aspect ratio is changing, the colours changing, and it's like, you know, it's so unfocused and so messy. It's so alienating. And especially on that first watch, I didn't have a clue what the film was trying to go for at all. And the reason I say it feels like a parody of the Grand Budapest is that, yeah, Grand Budapest has nice visuals, it has changing aspect ratios, but one, that was to differentiate the different time periods, you know. But it had characters that you cared about, had an engaging story, engaging through line, and had an interesting idea of the power of storytelling through the character of Zissou recounting these events. It felt a lot more organic, and the style and substance just married perfectly together. This is just pretty visuals and nothing really more for me. And as I said, those bottom three are quite interchangeable. On a different day, I might have them in a different order, but they'll always make up the bottom three of the West films that I don't really care for. So, going from the bad to the mediocre, number 8, we've got Isle of Dogs. Now, this film has some really great elements. First off, the animation. It's a brilliant looking film. Stop motion's always great. And the character designs, the expressions, it's awesome. There's some great scenes, and really, it's just a great visual treat. And I think what the visuals do is really help with the world building of this dystopian future. I think it's really well realised, like visually, and then that can lend to some interesting themes of, you know, propaganda in the film and like identity being stripped from the dogs. That's quite a thing of dystopian stories, you know, identity being stripped away. You could see that with the dog characters. I think that was something I found quite interesting. And, yeah, I think the world of this future, of this dystopian future, I think is really interesting. I just wish that the story and characters complemented it better because they are very simplistic. The dog gang, you know, I mean, I like the Bryan Cranston chief dog, he was kind of cool, but the others, you know, they're just there to say Wes Anderson dialogue, they're just sort of, yeah, they don't really add a lot to the film. Then you have the boy who is trying to look for his lost dog, and then the Bryan Cranston dog, he sort of forms a bond with him after being like, I'm not gonna, you know, he's a stray dog, but then he comes to warm up to the boy, and, you know, it's nice, but it's quite predictable and quite simplistic. You've got the villain who's very generic, there's not really a lot to him. Then there's that Greta Gerwig girl who's like a foreign exchange student who's just like really pointless to this film. Yeah, it has some really great things to it. I just wish it had a better story and characters to complement the great world. Because that's the thing with the recent Wes Anderson films. They're really great at world building and immersing you in the worlds that he creates. But, you know, story and characters have to be good as well. And number 7, we have Moonrise Kingdom, which is the first of Wes Anderson's films that I feel like has heart, or at least I can feel that heart in there. I think, you know, I think this is a fun, little wholesome little film, but I do have some story issues and some structure issues that do hold it back for me. Let's go over the positives. Looks great. I think Wes Anderson films do look great. You know, the cinematography, I think it's great. The colours are really quite warm and nostalgic, you know, that kind of cosy, those kind of yellows and greens, they're quite cosy and nostalgic, and I think has a nice atmosphere. It gives the film a nice atmosphere, I should say. I just think the Ed Norton Scoutmaster is a really cool, kooky character. I think he's quite charming and I really like him. But the main thing I love about this film is the main relationship with Sam and Susie, and that's at the core of the film. It's simple, but it's really wholesome and quite endearing to watch unfold, and it is quite charming. You know, these two kids don't really have a lot of people who kind of understand them in their lives, whether it's family or friends or their peers, but they find each other and they kind of have that connection, and it's quite wholesome. And I guess that kind of message of just, especially for younger people, just to be kinder towards others, I think it's just a nice little message with them. However, there are some things that do hold the film back, like outside of that. For example, Susie's parents, played by Bill Murray and Frances McDormand, they're going through marital troubles, and then there's the affair that the mother's having with the Bruce Willis cop character. Again, these things I just don't care for. They're not really developed, they're just sort of there, and they kind of eat away time at the Sam and Susie relationship, which is what I love from the film most. Yeah, the Bruce Willis cop really kind of does eat away time, and I don't know why he's here, really. I mean, especially considering he ends up, spoilers, adopting Sam at the end, but you don't really get a lot of time with him, and especially a lot of time with him and Sam. They have like one scene together before Bruce Willis is like, yeah, I'm going to adopt you now. It's like, what? I think it would have made more sense to have the Ed Norton Scoutmaster be the one to adopt Sam, because Ed Norton Scoutmaster, he's been there for the entirety of Sam's life in terms of the film, whereas Bruce Willis just was there for that one scene. But the Scoutmaster, he looks out for Sam quite a lot in the film. He does look out for him. So I feel like towards the end of the film, maybe he realises, no, I have a responsibility to look after this kid, because he kind of trusts me. I think that would have just worked, and it just felt more organic as opposed to Bruce Willis coming in, and it just doesn't, you don't really have that kind of, it's not very emotionally satisfying, I think. I also think the final act just sort of, it's such a bizarre tonal shift in the final act, because as I said, the first half of the film is quite wholesome, low-key, but quite cosy and cutesy, not cutesy, but just quite endearing to watch. It's simple but endearing. But then in the final act, there's a bloody thunderstorm, and I don't know how Sam survived that lightning strike. I do honestly feel like the climax of the film should have been Sam and Susie being found. Maybe it could have been in a different location, and maybe it could have gone a bit more extreme as the film went on. But that should have been the climax of the film, and then you can keep the 90-minute runtime, and then you can spend a bit more time developing Susie's parents, or the Bruce Willis cop, if you still want to have him be the one to adopt Sam in the end. Yeah, so there's some really nice things in this film. I just think structurally and character-wise, there are just a few things holding it back. So we are now halfway through the list, and I want to remind you folks that it is perfectly okay to disagree with me. You probably are going to, because I am not the biggest Wes Anderson fan. You're probably going to have wildly different opinions from me, and we're going to get to my hottest take on the list right now. But I say, please do not have a spat in the comments, because it's all just opinions on movies. With that said, I still don't get the hype around Fantastic Mr. Fox. I'm sorry, but I find this the most overrated of his filmography. It's a good film, it's charming, it's really well animated, but this does not have one of the best animated films of all time written on it for me. But the annoying thing is that the film doesn't really do a lot wrong, but I don't get what it does to... It doesn't blow me away. Nothing that the film does really blows me away, unlike other animated films that I adore, like Into the Spider-Verse, Spirited Away, Ratatouille, The Last Wish, etc. And on this rewatch, I feel like I found why I don't find the film that emotionally powerful. It's a combination of two things. First of all, you have Wes Anderson's deadpan style of writing and humour. We discussed this is not always to my taste. Life Aquatic, it kind of sunk that film because of the deadpan, especially with Bill Murray's character. I didn't feel that emotionally connected because of the deadpan delivery and the tone of it. Secondly, the stop motion animation, which is, in a vacuum, it's great. And the thing is with this film, it's not the most expressive thing in the world. Like, the character designs, they're not the most expressive. Compare this to, say, the Wallace and Gromit films. Or hell, even Isle of Dogs. I think the dogs in that film are more expressive than all the characters in this film, I think. But combine the deadpan tone and the more watered down expression for the characters, and you have a film where I just can't read the characters. I can't read them visually, and I just don't get those emotions. Especially when you have some quite powerful voice acting, particularly from George Clooney and Meryl Streep as Mr. and Mrs. Fox. I just can't get emotionally invested in it. Because even if, the delivery of the lines is deadpan, sometimes you can read an actor's face and it can tell a different story. You know what's a really good analogy from this film that I think might explain it quite well? Is, Kylie when he has like the swirly eyes at those times and Mr. Fox doesn't get what he's thinking? That's kind of me with the characters of this film. I can't read their faces. As well as that, it's also a very chatty film. There's a lot of dialogue quite frequently, and there's not really many silent moments where... I think that's the thing. A lot of the best animated films, they do have these moments of silence. Think the panic attack scene from The Last Wish, the train scene from Spirited Away. There's no dialogue there. It's just the visual speaking, and I think that's really powerful. In fact, in this film, there's a really nice silent scene where it's Ash and Christopherson. Christopherson's quite upset, and Ash gets down from his bed, puts the train on, and there's like kind of wholesome little music, and they just watch it together. And I thought that was a really sweet... No dialogue, but I thought it was a really sweet moment that helped to form a bit of a bond between these two, kind of polar opposite characters, but this kind of brought them together a little bit for the first time in the film. I thought that was a really nice scene, and it stuck out in my mind. I just wish the film had more of that. It's like, the story is fine, the characters especially, they serve their purpose in the story well enough, but I don't find them the most nuanced characters ever. I do really like Ash and Christopherson, though. I enjoyed their dynamic. I think there are some interesting themes of sort of rekindling a sense of youth, but overall I don't know, it doesn't really go above and beyond for me. I'm just about to film the Darjeeling Limited section and a train just passed. Coincidence? I think not! Anyway, number 5 is for me the most underrated Wes Anderson film, The Darjeeling Limited, which tends to get a bit of, not a negative rep, but just no one seems to talk about this one, and it's a shame because I really enjoy it. The thing is, before going in, I kind of knew that I would probably like this one a bit more than most, because it's not overly stylised, it's not got a big ensemble cast, it's more focused on the three brothers, Jason Schwartzman, Owen Wilson and Adrian Brody, and it's just focused on them, and it gives them time to breathe as characters, and I really got invested in them as a group of brothers, and I really felt the nuances in their performances. They felt their age. Like Jason Schwartzman felt like, you know, Jack. He felt like the younger brother. He had that kind of energy, and then Owen Wilson and Adrian Brody, I think, had those sort of more weightier things. I think Adrian Brody was probably my favourite of the three. But as a group, the kind of nuances and the interactions between them, I think, sells the idea that they are brothers. And, you know, it's not like in a deadpan way, and it's not overdone either. It's just like the right, you know, you notice these subtleties and the kind of self-discovery, you know. It kind of almost feels like what Bottle Rocket tried to do, but this is kind of more fully fleshed out. And yeah, it's just a charming slice-of-life escapade with these three brothers exploring India. I think it's a very well-photographed film. I think it looks very nice. The colours really pop. I think the train stuff is nice. And there's some fun little vignettes on the train, like the pepper spray bit. That always cracks me up, that does. But yeah, it's not like an overly stylised Wes film as well. It's just more subdued. But, you know, it's still got his little flair to it. It's still got his unique trademarks and idiosyncrasies. And it's just a fun, really underrated film. And I think more people should give it a bit more attention. Now, at number 4, we have, for me, the most surprising of all of these, Asteroid City, his most recent film, and his most divisive, even amongst his fan base. A lot of people love it, and a lot of people hate it, and I was really surprised to be on the love it side of things. I thought this would not be my thing at all, but I really loved it, and even though I think the next film on the list is objectively the better film, I feel more passionately about this one. That's quite interesting. This is easily Wes's most ambitious film. There's so much in terms of so many characters here. There's obviously the framing of obviously the Asteroid City plotline, but also the play and the documentary thing and the black and white stuff with Bryan Cranston narrating it. There's also these themes of like grief, getting over grief, existentialism. There's a lot here, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. I really appreciate the ambition, and there's a lot to think about, but I think that's its main issue. It's very ambitious, and I don't think it fully comes together as a fully coherent whole. I think some strands are a bit loose, particularly the Asteroid City plotline. It's a bit it drifts apart, and there's so many characters in that. I think not all of them I particularly care for. But to be honest, I don't mind that. I think the Asteroid City plotline itself, I really love the vibe of it. I mean, one, it looks great, the colours, the set design, but I think these little sort of pockets of characters and their interactions with each other, I think it makes it feel lived in. It kind of immerses me in the world. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy spending time in this sort of world with all these characters. Obviously, you've got Jason Schwartzman as Augie, who's a war photographer who's lost his wife, and you know he's got his 3 kids, and his father-in-law, played by Tom Hanks. Then you've got Scarlett Johansson as Midge Campbell, the actress. You've got Steve Carell as like the motel manager who's trying to sell real estate. You've got Maya Hawke as the school teacher with her class of children, and then she sort of falls for the Rupert Friend cowboy, and they sing a song as well. And all these interactions, it makes the world feel lived in, and I think that's a really great thing. It reminds me a bit of the League of Gentlemen, you know, the sketch show, but instead of it being in a town in the north of England, it's an Americana setting, and I think it's just really cool. I also love the 50s aesthetic, the sort of squeaky clean vibe, the kind of fascination with aliens and all that stuff, and I think the alien design looks really cool, the kind of little blend of stop motion. Is it stop motion? Yeah, it is stop motion. That's a really great... I love the alien scene, actually, when it finally lands and sort of steals the asteroid. I think it's really cool, and the way that the alien is stop motion, it just feels out of place visually compared to the live action stuff. I think it makes it feel alien, and that's something I've never really seen replicated before in a film, but yeah, like an alien would look visually out of place with the rest of Earth's surroundings. It just would, and I think that's a really great thing. I also think it's really funny. It's one of Wes's funnier films, in my opinion. I think there's some really great cracking lines, and yeah, there's plenty to laugh at in this film. But then getting into the deeper themes of the film with like grief and existentialism and all that stuff, I think the stuff with Midge and Augie, that's Schwartzman and Johansson, I think the connection that they sort of form is quite cool, quite interesting. And I think Schwartzman's performance is really good at sort of conveying the grief in a sort of way and how he kind of won't open up about it, but you can sort of see it in moments. I think it's quite well done. I think they could have explored it a little bit more, but I was kind of happy with certain things. And then there's the whole line, you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep, which I don't know, that line just stuck with me. I think, not necessarily exclusively about grief, but just about dealing with emotional turmoil and just problem solving in general in life. You can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. I think that's just a great way of summarising that. It's like you can't move forward in life if you don't stop and confront a problem that's hindering you from moving. I don't know, there's just something about that line that just summarises it perfectly, and it stuck with me. I mean, the main metaphor of the film that I think a lot of people picked up on is then the characters being stuck in Asteroid City because of the alien and the quarantining. Because they're stuck in Asteroid City, it's almost a metaphor of being trapped there, is being able to is being unable to escape grief, being able to, it's almost like grief is trapping Augie, Jason Schwartzman's character. I think even the like Americana 1950s setting, I think because the 50s is kind of an idealised time in American history, you know, the kind of suburban, like nuclear family, for example, that's kind of what's expected, and it's almost like squeaky clean and whatnot, and yet Augie doesn't have that, right? And maybe that make him feel out of place. And that kind of segues on to the ideas of existentialism and kind of your place in the universe after an earth-shattering event. You know, a lot of the characters kind of question what's the purpose, you know, what's their point, especially with the alien, like what's the point? Is it all futile? The alien looks at us like we're doomed and whatnot. And then that's kind of where it extends to the play framework with the Asteroid City sort of story being a play. And I guess trying to find meaning through art. And then you have the amazing scene with Margot Robbie, which is fantastic, and you know, finding meaning in art, or is that a fool's errand? Like, there's so many interesting questions that the film poses, and it's kept me thinking. I watched this, as I'm recording it, about a week ago, and it's still not leaving my mind. I just find it such an interesting idea to think on and ponder, and I haven't intended to rewatch it. And yeah, while it doesn't fully come together, I wouldn't argue, the highs that the film hits are so high that I kind of wouldn't want it any other way. Like, the imperfections, in a way, sort of make the film for me. So I was really surprised by this one, and I bloody love it. Cracking the top 3 now is Rushmore, Wes Anderson's second film, and this is another one where I was kind of umming and ahhing on whether to put this or Asteroid City at third, but this is what the tiebreaker was for me. Whilst I'm more passionate about Asteroid City, and while its themes, I think, resonate with me more, I think Rushmore is, one, the tighter film, it's the more sort of coherent film, and two, it's the more accessible film. Asteroid City, as great as it is, it's very an acquired taste, right? But Rushmore, I feel like anybody can get into, and as well, I think it's probably the perfect introduction to Wes Anderson. It's not overly stylized. I think there is some, you know, symmetry and, you know, the shots and whatnot, and the kind of dialogue and the humour. It's definitely very Wes, but just not as overdone as his later works. But yeah, Rushmore as a film, it's great. I love it. I think it's a really great story. It reminds me a bit of The Graduate, the old Mike Nichols film, and I love that film. And I found myself kind of drawn to films with imperfect and like problematic protagonist, shall we say, because, you know, Max, he's creepy, he's after the teacher, you know, it's kind of high school crush kind of thing. He takes it too far. There's the whole revenge war with him and Bill Murray, the kind of a friendship sort of breaks apart because of this love triangle. And I always find that interesting, you know, characters aren't, you know, in real life, you know, there isn't a good, evil sort of binary opposition. That's just not how the world works. And I find films like Rushmore, like The Graduate, a lot of like Tarantino films with criminals as the protagonist, I find those interesting because it isn't a clear good versus bad guy sort of mentality. I find it interesting, and I think the filmmaking supports Max's character and really gives an insight into his mentality. I think it's the way that the shots are composed, or the montage that shows all the clubs that he's involved in, and just, I think the filmmaking tells us a lot about the character. And that's why I think this is one of my favourite Wes films, because it's where the style blends with the substance. I think that's what I like from Wes. It's overall just a really great film. It's quite fun, the script is very witty, and as I said, it's probably the best introduction to Wes Anderson's films. I think it's a great gateway into his films. In second place, we have his most acclaimed film, and probably his magnum opus, I suppose, The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a fantastic film. It's the only one of his films that has ever got a Best Picture nomination, and yeah, I can see why. Even though it's not my personal favourite, we'll get to Royal Tenenbaums in a sec. This is his most complete film in a way. It's the one that I think, again, anybody can enjoy. It's a bit of a crowd pleaser, really, and it blends style. It's got great style. It's such a vibrant film. The colours are gorgeous. The aspect ratio is great, as I said with French Dispatch. This time it has a point of differentiating the time periods and whatnot. Costumes, the set design, it's all like immaculate, but it's got plenty of substance. It's just got real heart to it. The murder mystery murder mystery and the kind of crime plot, it's interesting. It's almost like a buddy comedy. And then you've got probably my favourite Wes characters, Gustav, played by Ralph Fiennes, and Zero, played by Tony Ravioli. They are such a great duo. I love their dynamic. Gustav has such a heart to him. He's such an affable presence in the film. Zero is such a plucky sidekick character. His romance with Agatha is really endearing, and you really come to care about these characters. But also the side characters are memorable, like Dimitri or the Willem Dafoe bounty hunter. They are a great set of antagonists, and there's some great other characters throughout the film. And the mystery and the intrigue, the scenarios that they end up getting involved in, and it's all just really enjoyable. There is also some interesting texture into the film, like for example the rise of fascism. Obviously this is set in Europe during the 30s, and the way that fascism it's always there in the film, but it sort of creeps in slowly until it becomes quite overt towards the end of the film, and that kind of reflects reality, and I think that's a really interesting bit of texture into the film. And then the whole thing of the power of the storytelling, which is something that Wes has done a bit more recently. You know, French Dispatch did it, Asteroid City did it, but I think Grand Budapest is the one where the power of storytelling kind of idea is implemented the best and most organically. Because you have the older Zero played by F. Murray Abraham telling the Jude Law writer character in the years after the fact, and how the story being written down and being published and whatnot, and how Zero is telling the story, it's almost a way for Zero to kind of, you know, in a way get over the grief in a sense, especially over Agatha, how much he misses and how much it breaks his heart. I think it's just a really great way of doing that. And how these stories, you know, survive through the years, and how like the events of this film are loosely based on true events. I think, you know, where this film existing is a way to allow these people in a way to survive and live throughout history. And I think that's probably a really great way of incorporating that power of storytelling idea. And then at number 1, I've put the Royal Tenenbaums, which I take back any criticism I've ever made about Wes Anderson not doing emotion, because when he can, he can. This is just bang on exactly what I want from Wes Anderson. It's got that emotional hook, it's got that emotional anchor with the family, and they're trying to kind of reunite and reconnect. The style of the film, yes, it's stylized. You know, the imagery from this film is quite iconic. You know, the headbands, the jumpsuits, the costumes are iconic from the film. The visuals are iconic from this film, but it still feels kind of grounded and rooted in reality. But the character stuff in this film is amazing, and probably because it is less plot driven, it is more of just, it's quite episodic, the structure. It's just events about these characters, and you just see them unfold, and as Royal tries to reconnect with his children that have sort of left him behind. You know, you have Margot, Gwyneth Paltrow's character, you know, suffering from depression and her sort of relationships. You have Chaz, Ben Stiller's character, he's an overprotective father trying to look after his kids after the death of his wife in a fire. It's really impactful, and the way he sort of ends up, you know, he doesn't want anything to do with Royal, but then towards the end of the film, how they reconnect, it's beautiful. And then there's Richie. I don't really need to say if you've seen the film, but Jesus Christ, the places he goes to, man. And then you have Royal, played by Gene Hackman, who it's so weird seeing Gene Hackman like a star of like old Hollywood. You know, he was from films like, you know, Bonnie and Clyde, French Connection, the old Superman movies, but seeing him in like a Wes Anderson film, it's such a weird feeling. But that's why I think I love this film as well. Like, it's not just the same pool of actors, you know, Gene Hackman, Ben Stiller, Danny Glover, you know, these actors that are outside of Wes's usual pool of talent. I think it's really interesting to see. But Gene Hackman as Royal, he's a really horrible person. He's a dick. But seeing him redeem himself throughout the film and trying to reconnect with his kids, it feels genuine. It really does. And when he passes away at the end, it's heartbreaking. And then when you have Chaz with him, who was the one who really hated him the most, you could tell. Just seeing them like together, it hits you in the feels, man, even just thinking about it. Even if Grand Budapest, Rushmore might be more accessible, this just is personally my favourite of this one. And I'm so glad that I at least have this to just love and adore. And that's it. That's every Wes Anderson film ranked, which I really enjoy doing that, even though I've said he's not really my cup of tea, and even though he's not my favourite director out there, I really like going through his filmography and just seeing what I liked, finding new favourites like the Royal Tenenbaums. I think films like Grand Budapest Hotel and Rushmore are really accessible to anyone. I think anybody will get something out of them. And even some of the other ones, I think give them a try. Stuff like French Dispatch, Moonrise Kingdom, Fantastic Mr. Fox, definitely. I imagine a lot of you will like more than me, so give them a try. I mean, Asteroid City I didn't expect to love as much as I did, but lo and behold, I loved it. And, you know, give these films a try, and, you know, you might find something that connects with you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you weren't too offended at some of my controversial opinions. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. What are your thoughts on some of the Wes Anderson films, or all of them? Give me a ranking if you want to. And let me know some other filmmakers that you'd like me to cover in a ranking. The next one would probably be either Tarantino or Nolan. I'm thinking more Tarantino, because I've only got like 2 films of his to see next, so probably would be him if I ever did another one of these. But let me know some other filmmakers you'd like me to see do a ranking of. But yeah, like, subscribe, comment, click the notification bell, all that good stuff, and until next time, you take care.